I'll quickly just do an introduction into myself. So my name is Paul Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of DiSRUPT and one of the founders of Includability. Both, I'm incredibly proud to say, are B Corp certified. And we're a recruitment company that kind of really puts kind of ethics and values at the top of everything that we do. So not just finding candidates for jobs and working with clients, but actually how do we have a positive impact on everything from that journey, sourcing the candidates, making sure that everything's inclusive, working with the clients to benefit that, and how do we add value from the very beginning. And a big part of that journey from taking kind of, and Dave's on the call, and Dave's been an incredible advocate of kind of making sure that B Corp plays a big journey in our own journeys with DiSRUPT and Includability. One of the big processes that we went through and conversations that we have regularly is kind of on supply chain. So how regularly do you review it? How do you know which suppliers to choose? How do you know how they kind of operate? And it's been an incredibly cathartic process, I think, for us kind of going through it. And when we were speaking to more people, it's becoming a bigger and bigger topic. And it's a bigger topic from a business perspective in terms of making sure you know it, but also from a consumer perspective. It's becoming even more paramount that our supply chains are ethical and that they're transparent. So the whole point of today is to talk about ethical supply chain costs versus ethics. Is it more expensive to change your supply chain to a supplier that might be more kind of ethical? There are some house rules. So please just ensure you're on mute, and so that when the guests are speaking, we've got some incredible guest speakers for you today, and so that there's kind of no background noise. Please also introduce yourselves. Make the chat feed busy. Tell us who you are, what company you work for, what are the successes or challenges you've had when it comes to reviewing and kind of choosing your suppliers, because then we can use that as part of the conversation kind of moving forward. We want this to be a really interactive webinar. So I'm going to kind of hand over now. So we've got incredible guests. As I said, we've got Lucie Montel, we've got Dan Williams, Alan Mann, and Ed Hobbs, all from certified B Corp organizations. So I'm going to hand over the virtual floors. Lucie, the virtual floor is yours for a couple of minutes, just to introduce yourself and your company.
Of course, what an honor. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm Lucie. I work at Greenheart. We're a social and environmental impact consultancy based in the UK, but working with clients and businesses that have operations very much spanning across the entire world. What we're possibly most known for is our expertise in B Corp, helping companies throughout the entire stages of the B Corp journey. But we actually help companies with a lot more areas of social and environmental impact, from all things environment, carbon footprinting, environmental management systems, but also all of the other pockets of understanding a company's impact. And one of those being supply chain and supply chain impact. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. I'm not too sure who I pass on the mic to.
It's fine. I will hand it over to Dan.
Always have to remember to unmute, actually. Despite doing these all the time, I still forget that small little thing. Hi, I'm just getting over a bit of a cold, so apologies. But Dan Williams, CEO of Orean Personal Care. We're a contract manufacturer and developer, now marketing house essentially for brands, where we help startups, founder-led brands and existing brands get into the markets. We've got a contract manufacturing site in the UK, and we've got one in the US as well. And we became B Corp certified at the back end of last year.
Over to Alan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My name's Alan. I'm the founder of a B Corp certified beer brand called Brewgooder. I guess fundamentally we exist to use the power of beer, both in terms of social, economic, to basically brew a fairer world for everybody. So that started, I guess, from my own experience with being ill from unsafe water, and that's kind of where we started in unlocking now hundreds of millions of liters of water in developing communities. But as we've developed, one of our focuses has been how can we make everything we do the best it possibly can be for people foremost and for planet. And as you'll kind of find, I guess, hopefully from the talk, the questions that are going to be asked, how we're actually treating I guess, people who we would have considered beneficiaries of our work from a clean water point of view, and actually integrating them into our supply chain, so that rather than drinking last in the value chain, they eat first. So yeah, I'm really delighted to be able to share that story with you, and hopefully you guys find something valuable to take away.
Amazing. And your session IPA is awesome. Ed.
Hi there, guys. I'm Ed Hobbs, Regional Operations Manager for X and Y. We're a flexible workspace provider, so we got 8 buildings across the UK at the moment, with a couple more to come in the next couple of months. We are also proud to be B Corp. We're the home of B Lab in the UK, and finding businesses who are purpose driven. So that's businesses with a purpose more than just making a profit, and also helping other businesses to follow that same path is really at the core of what we do. So yeah, got the pleasure of working with a couple of the people on this call as part of our YB program, which does just that, and yeah, creating amazing spaces to connect people up with events, with community, and yeah, hopefully all learn from one another, which is what I'm looking forward to doing on this call.
Amazing, thanks. And thank you all for kind of, I guess, taking the time to be here and kind of share your own learnings, kind of what it is, why does it kind of mean so much to you? Because everyone has a different opinion, everyone has a different mindset, but also then it's kind of knowing where to start, how to implement it, and kind of how to make sure that it's continually reviewed and having the impact that you want, right? And also you're all from very different industries, which I think then brings a nice kind of stance to it. I think it probably makes sense to start with kind of what does kind of sustainability kind of mean to you? What does it mean to kind of your business? What does it mean to your clients? And I'm going to hand that straight over to Dan, I think.
Thanks a lot, Paul. It's funny, as our business, where we work with so many different brands, I think one of the biggest things is identifying at times, because it can be a minefield, to be quite honest. When I hear people talking about what sustainability means to them, it means something different to everyone else. So what we try and do as a business is, when we first start talking to brands, is understand exactly what sustainability means to them, because there's certain solutions that we can find as a contract manufacturer and developer to actually complement that and help them on that journey, because we know at some point they're going to be stood there in front of a potential PR agency or in front of the press, and they're going to have to communicate why they've made certain decisions. And if you listen to all the different solutions, you end up not being a very sustainable business, because you just got yourself in a complete and utter muddle. So first and foremost, we, as a business ourselves, we have to make sure our business is sustainable. If you haven't created a sustainable business, then you can't do all the other good stuff that goes with it. And that's exactly what we say to the brands that we're working with as well. Just make sure that you're creating a sustainable business model, because then you can start doing all the really good stuff that can start impacting the world on a macro level, the local communities and stuff like that. So yeah, for us, it's about making the right choices, I guess. From the sustainability piece for us has been very much driven by, I suppose to its core, it's doing things like we were putting solar on the roof because we want to start trying to use renewable energy, and then all the waste initiatives that you start bringing into the business. I think if you can start really knowing what's important to you as a business, I think that just gives you a very clear and defined route on the way forward.
Absolutely. I will kind of pass this out as well to kind of the others as well, but I'd be intrigued to know some of your customers that come to you, do they come at it from a we want to be sustainable, or are they coming at it from a we want to be sustainable for our customers, and that's part of the PR? And do you see kind of much of a split between it?
Yeah, no, I think actually wholeheartedly they want to be sustainable as a business. They don't want to be sustainable for their consumers. So it's very much, for me, it's almost like the greenwashing thing. We don't want people just to say they're sustainable for the sake of saying they're sustainable. So it's very much when they come to us, they're like, we want to be sustainable. So they want us to find the most sustainable packaging, for instance, for a brief. That's a minefield in itself. Every manufacturer you speak to, from a plastic manufacturer to an aluminium manufacturer, to another material I can't think off my feet. There's pros and cons for everything. So people are doing going down the glass route. There's a lot of energy that will go into the repurposing of glass. If you're going down aluminium, 85% or something crazy like that of the aluminium that's ever been produced is still in circulation today. It's still really expensive to actually repurpose that aluminium. So it's kind of, they're definitely coming at it from a route where they want to do the right thing, but it's clearly us just trying to actually say to what does it mean to you, and then we can find the most suitable solutions for that. A lot of the consumers that they want everything to be in the UK. Some even want to make that more focused because they want to work on the carbon footprint. Some it's about finding the most using byproducts of materials and things like that. And sometimes things are coming from the Far East, so it's a lot more recyclable, user friendly, but the carbon footprint's massive. So trying to help people navigate that, pretty challenging, but it helps at first when they've got a really clear idea. But to be quite honest, I don't think many are coming at it from definitely from our experience, where we want to be sustainable because it's what consumers want. I think it's kind of a given now that most consumers want that, and it's just you do all the other stuff around it at the same time. Most people are shopping now with ethical brands, aren't they?
They are. And Alan, I'm going to hand that over to you to kind of continue on in terms of kind of what that means to you as a business, to your client base.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say that I agreed with literally 99% of what Dan said, but I actually don't think that all consumers are shopping sustainably. I don't even think a majority are, to be honest. I think we are probably exposed to more people in our circles for various reasons, largely because we probably know and are people who can afford to shop sustainably. But I think in the cost of living crisis, I think that's actually tended to actually go backwards. I think one of the real scary things is that vegan alternatives started to become more expensive than meat, and people actually then reverted back into cheaper meats. So it's almost like it's a bit of a whack-a-mole scenario. You know, we have to, I think, going back to the point, our businesses have to be sustainable for the long term in order for those changes that we're making from let's just say a big S sustainable or capital S sustainable to actually have a long-term impact. For me, you know, I operate in an industry, you know, again, to Dan's point, that is awash with potential greenwashing. You know, there's no going away from it that brewing is a very water intensive industry, and it is quite a wasteful industry, and there's also social impacts that are negative at some parts of our industry. So, you know, it faces a number of sustainability challenges, and I think one of the things that we've always focused on doing is that we didn't come to this business, I guess, to start it up because sustainability was a trend. Even if it becomes untrendy again, which I hope it doesn't, or just becomes part of the hygiene factors of businesses, I think we'll continue to push in every single direction. And I think that everyone here probably agrees with that, because they're B Corps, and it's more than just one specific area. There's 5 or 6 areas there that everyone tries to work on to be, you know, the best they possibly can be without necessarily ever achieving perfection. But for us, you know, the consumer is actually more skeptical really than we ever thought about claims that are made by brands. And the bigger the claim, the more skeptical the consumer is of that brand, but by proxy, future claims being made in you know, general. And I think that that's really, really harmful. And I think how we treat the sustainability messaging as brands, whether it's in beer, whether it's somewhere else, has to be really delicate and really thought through and transparent and accountable. Because people, when they scratch away at something, want to know that you're in business for the right reasons, for people and planet, and that you're not making or inflating claims, and actually they're prepared to go on a bit of a journey with you. So I think that definitely we've experienced a bit of a sea change in how we approach, probably not a sea change in how we approach it, but much more long-term view. You know, when we came out as a brand, it was all about, you know, we are this, we are that. And actually what we tried to do is just become a really, really good beer brand, something that can be enjoyed in fun times, but also really, really good quality. And then we've used that as the platform to introduce more and more sustainability, not just from our business model, but also in terms of our inputs in supply chain. So I think for businesses to be sustainable, they have to meet the consumer need. And the consumer is not going to shop with the first order preference being sustainability. They want to have, if they want to have food, it's something that's tasty. You know, if they're managing a budget, it has to be cost competitive. You know, it has to say something about them, I guess, aspirationally in some of our markets. And then probably the fourth order is probably that sustainability thing, right? They want you to do the work so that they don't have to in many ways. And that's different from generations that have come before. You know, Generation Alpha, for example, might have that sustainability thing number 2 instead of number 4. But we've come a long way from it being not a consideration or number 10. And there's a lot of grenades I just chucked in there. So hopefully I don't distract us from that question for anybody else.
Really, it's really interesting what you say about kind of the marketing of the sustainability and the messaging that goes out, because the negativity and the thoughts of a consumer naturally goes to think, well, that's all to a degree kind of sometimes bullshit, and actually just kind of overriding that with actually that clear messaging. I'll kind of come back on and ask you that kind of question of how your mindset might change as a business when it comes to then choosing your suppliers, because as you mentioned, kind of cost of living prices, etc. But Ed, I want to kind of come to you, because obviously completely different industry to that of say Alan. But what are the top 3 things that you would kind of look for in a supplier in the industry that you're in?
Yeah, well, firstly, I completely agree with a lot of what Alan said there, and I think the way that we look for suppliers is kind of how you might look as a consumer to look for those products. I think having people who are aligned with you, talked about aspirational. I think for us, that aspiration is on being purpose driven. Having that purpose runs through the core of our business, and people who are excited to be a part of that change and, willing to go the extra mile, work at pace, change the way that people are working. And with our supply chain, it is really diverse. We work with beer suppliers, we work with coffee suppliers, we work with cleaning suppliers, we build buildings. So having suppliers who we can not just have as vendors, but have as partners on that journey is really important to us. With that as well, I think reliability is a key one for us. When we do need to have a high-end product, we've got very high standards. Our member companies and individual members have got very high standards. So people who, again, are up for that challenge, that they are going to want to go the extra mile and are going to want to pick up pace is huge for us. And then I'd probably say flexibility. We're kind of, I think I heard it mentioned before, but we're looking for progress here, not perfection. Accreditations change over time as we get more understanding. Something that was thought it was sustainable 5 years ago actually isn't the most sustainable option now. So people who are going to be up for constantly iterating, they want to go through reviews with us. It is that partnership rather than kind of vendor relationship. I think if we have those 3 in place, then everything else can kind of slot in behind.
And I think we've had the incredible pleasure, Ed, of kind of seeing that firsthand, I guess. So
you are one of our wonderful partners.
Exactly. From a recruitment perspective, which ordinarily you wouldn't necessarily perhaps include as part of your supply chain, but actually is a vital part of that, to make sure that the values match, that make sure that actually the impact goes beyond that of finding a candidate, and actually how do they align. So there's so much that makes up this incredible thing that is a supply chain that keeps our businesses running and our customers happy. Dan, from your perspective, how have you identified kind of the suppliers that you work with? Because I guess they are so wide ranging. Is that a cumulative kind of team effort to kind of pick those suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, in some nature of our industry, in some instances, you're when you're formulating and you're using certain actives, and they can only be produced by one manufacturer. So you kind of steered at that route. But from a selecting it now, we're very much, and this I completely agree with the previous comments, because transactional relationships kind of have the place, and if people want those as a supplier, then we can use those as required. But the big thing for us, I'd say over the past few months, we've been putting together, and essentially leading up to this webinar, but we've been putting together our 5-year plan. And the reason why we've done that is we want to get everyone internally here really focused on the same vision and goal that we've got, get everyone on the same journey, roll that out to our staff, get that all included. Then we're sharing that with customers, and we're also sharing it with suppliers. We can't achieve what we want to achieve as a business unless we have suppliers on board, and the suppliers on board need to know exactly what we expect from them, what we want from them, and what they get in return. What we don't want to do, we don't want a supplier to feel necessarily like a supplier. They need to feel part of the wheel, like another cog in that machine, I guess, that's getting us to this end goal and helping us to achieve what we want to achieve. And I think from the more we're speaking to key partners and these suppliers that we have, everyone's really aligned and on board and almost going for the same goals. So it feels quite easy from that side. But again, going back to it, as part of doing this strategy to get the right suppliers, we talk about the flexibility that we need the speed, we need the quality that comes with it. We know that there's some compromises on it. What we don't want to do is we don't want to be in a position where you beat people up for letting you down and go and do that old school approach. It's just like, no, we're in this together. We can work through stuff, and we just don't want it to feel like that's a transactional relationship at all. Like, they're key to our success as much as the consumers, as much as the customers are. And I think if we're all driving in that stage, it makes perfect sense. I think the big thing for me from having the B Corp thing, which we were actually encouraged to do, we weren't even thinking about it at the time, but everyone could see what we were doing through things like LinkedIn, and we started getting encouraged to do it. We knew that a lot of the brands that we're working with were on that same journey. On the back of doing that now, we've had suppliers contact us. We're trying to help other suppliers. We're helping other brands go on this journey. So it feels like everyone's core values are kind of aligning, which makes it quite nice. And actually, from a collaboration piece, I've never known it in the past couple of years of other, which would have been deemed as competitors in the past. Everyone seems to be working hand in hand and trying to support one another. Actually, I mean, you're still competing for some business at certain times, aren't you? But there's a much more open approach to helping one another with supply chain. I've had other manufacturers phoning me up saying, we're struggling with this, where are you sourcing this? And you're helping. So I think all the way along that whole supply chain, people are a lot more supportive.
I think the collaborative approach is the only way for us to all make meaningful change. Because if we're all kind of siloed and we're heading our own directions, I think that's the one beautiful thing around B Corp is we took a very B Corp led approach to finding our suppliers, even kind of utilizing, say, Pay Captain for kind of our payroll, where actually we thought if we can surround ourselves with as many B Corps as possible, they've gone through the same process as us. So actually kind of really getting to know them and treating individuals like clients, customers, suppliers, and employees as stakeholders, and making sure they're considered in kind of our strategy and kind of what we do as an organization.
I completely underestimated the power of the B Corp community, actually. And
it's powerful.
As soon as the amount of people that have got in touch, introducing us, and even just in the introductions seem different. You know, everyone's approach is very, very different. But the amount of energy that's out there that people genuinely want to help you, and if they can't help you, they find someone that can help you. That's why I love it when you share goals with people, because it's no coincidence that suddenly you get people coming out of the woodwork all trying to help you out. I find it phenomenally powerful and inspiring. I
think the power of storytelling can really inspire and empower people. I think that's kind of really important. One thing actually I would love to say, I think it was Alan, you may have mentioned it around kind of the greenwashing. I think transparency then becomes a bit of a thought process, because you want to be transparent and you want to be open, but then you've got that constant thought of people saying, well, is that actually true? So this is open, I guess, open to all four of you, and jump in as you like, but how transparent are you around your supply chain? And anyone jump in. And how do you communicate that? How do you go about communicating that to external kind of parties?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, actually, and from shouting and thanking people when they do stuff. I comment on suppliers' links all the time and thank them for the work they do. From that side, I think we're really open. We haven't gone so far as like publishing a list of it. Actually, I think we've actually shouted out about some key suppliers on social. I can't remember when we did it. And actually, I think on one of our slides that we were going to be presenting, we're thanking actually some of the key partners that we've got. So yeah, we haven't published an official list of people that supply us. That goes into like the 4,000s, I think, but be quite exhaustive. But yeah, whenever there's a big opportunity, there's definitely no secrets from our supply chain. We're happy to share successes from that side.
Lucie, what about yourself when it comes to work? Oh, sorry, Ed.
I was going to say, jumping in, I think we really want to elevate all of our supply chain as much as we can. You know, we put a lot of work into finding suppliers who are in line with us, and I do think that the B Corp environment is amazing, and that kind of collaboration over competition, or even healthy competition where we're sharing ideas, and I think that does breed positive change. But I think someone from DiSRUPT messaged me about it today, but we run a who, what, why on our socials, which we're often featuring some of our suppliers on there, telling their story. If you go into our coffee machines in our buildings, there's a QR code where you can hear about the impact that they're making in the coffee industry. So I think kind of trying to find a broad range of suppliers who are in line with those values, and then shouting about them. I think we're in a great position where, you know, we create a platform where lots of people come in and interact with our spaces, so it can give exposure to brands and people who otherwise wouldn't have it. So we really try and be transparent there, and then also I think feedback is a gift, so that the more that we learn, and the more that people start talking about these things, and the more that it does spark a conversation, hopefully it just creates that constant positive change and constant positive movement. Because I think certainly within the B Corp community, I think it is constantly looking to get better, not just kind of sitting on your haunches and saying, you know, we did a B Corp accreditation once, you're going to have to do it again. And that's the whole point, is it's kind of a framework for you to try and get better. So I think from that aspect, we certainly try and be transparent.
And Lucie, Alan, anything to add to kind of what kind of Dan and Ed have mentioned already?
Well, a lot to add, but of course, I guess just to picking up that question as Greenheart, I do believe that we disclose our significant supplier on our impact scorecard on our little impact report website that we have. But arguably the most significant impact that we have in helping clients with their own supply chain, like management, impact management, and transparency disclosures. But so maybe we can, I don't know if you're already segueing into another question, or if we should unpack that one, for instance, and what supply chain good supply chain management practices look like.
Unpack it, Lucie.
Yes, all right. Because I think that's a question that we get a lot of. Okay, so like, what does good supply chain management look like for a B Corp, and what does it take? And what I wanted to clarify is, like, first, the B Corp standard like doesn't ask you specifically to fulfill certain practices. It's really a questionnaire that captures any positive practices that a business can have in its current version of the standard. You can then score and be certified reaching a certain score. Where it's very helpful is that, therefore, this questionnaire and this assessment gives you an idea of all the potential good practices that you can implement. And when it comes to supply chain impact, it's very gradual, and it starts with just even understanding, do you have first an idea of who your suppliers are? So the Corp assessment is looking at a financial year, and it starts with looking, where are you spending your money? And I think, as it was said before, which companies do you decide to invest in? Because this is where you're spending your money. And then looking at, do you have any accountability mechanism? Do you set standards with them? Do you share a supplier code of conduct? And then moving a bit more deeper is understanding what is the impact that these companies themselves have. Do they monitor their own energy, their own water, etc.? And do you understand, therefore, your like indirect impacts through understanding the impact of your suppliers? And then throughout all of these exchanges, because like you have had conversation, you've started building this relationship and can understand, as you're yourself on your own sustainability journey, like, where do they need more support, and where can we build stronger relationships? Can we bring several of our suppliers on a kind of like learning, knowledge sharing kind of format, etc.? I think yet another point, and I'll give back the floor, but is I think something as well that when you're looking at Excel sheets with big numbers, or like carbon footprinting, Excel sheets again, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of something that sounds very mechanical. But in the end of the day, these are also people. These are people that are themselves like your point of contact at the suppliers. And these are also people that are doing their best, that are also trying to balance, you know, their own commercial context and making the right decisions. And that it's also about building those relationships. So one would like to figure out what to do with their supply chain tomorrow, or even potentially yesterday. But it will take time, and it's really with these relationships that you build that you will step by step get a better understanding and start making progress. That was a bit of a waffle.
No, not at all. But I think it also goes to highlight how incredibly complex it can be to navigate your way to an ethical supply chain. Like, it is not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time, it takes strategy, it takes multiple people to be involved in it to then kind of deploy and implement it. Alan, I'm going to kind of come to you now, and this is something that kind of Dave asked me to kind of ask you. So you've got a range of kind of brewers that you work with, all of whom are at different stages of their own sustainability journey. How do you go about using your economic leverage as a customer to improve their sustainability credentials?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. You know, we run a distributed brewing model for a number of different reasons. I think the primary one is that we recognize that there's lots of spare capacity within the brewing industry. That actually what the brewing industry in the UK doesn't need is another, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 hectare brewery. There's too many of them to begin with, and they're not all full. And we thought that that was a way of tapping into expertise, you know, definitely getting, you know, a capital light business model so that actually we could invest more in our impact or in growing sales, which then grows impact, rather than, you know, investing it into stainless steel. And just naturally, you know, you then have to work with what you've got in many ways. Some of our and distributed brewing effectively, you know, uses carbon at the point of brewing versus keeping the lights on, keeping the, you know, the factory running. But you end up, you know, with different breweries of different ages, different, you know, ambitions, different, you know, even different ways of talking about their own sustainability. You know, legacies from, you know, building breweries in the 60s versus building breweries in the 2010s, I guess, is considerable. And we always try to, I guess, place as much beer we possibly can, not with the person who gives us the cheapest cost, because that usually is indicative of poor quality as well. You know, or they're, you know, the costs are being paid by something else somewhere else, and that might be the environment. So we tend to try and go on a journey with everybody just the same way as being discussed. But recognizing that people have different motivations for being in business other than just us as well. So it's actually about explaining to them that by the time, you know, when we started working with lots of different breweries, we were 250 grand's worth of beer being purchased. Now we're close to 4 million quid of beer being purchased. Some of them will be their biggest customers, right? You know, even bigger than some supermarkets. So at that point, that's when you probably have to say, like, listen, guys, for us to continue to grow, you know, we'd want to, and we want to do it with you because we value you guys as a supplier. We love the beer that we make, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you're going to have to at least take a few steps in the right direction. Some might do that on themselves. Some might need a bit of forcing. And we have a spectrum, if you like, an Overton window of, you know, some of the most sustainable breweries in the UK, which can't fit us in anymore. Is there an opportunity to then actually use the volume that we're switching to bring other people on with commitments? So, and that's not an overnight thing, right? Because then that is convincing somebody else to invest in equipment, machinery, or alternative processes, which are, you know, expensive, and the payback is longer term. But we think that so far so good. We are definitely convincing people to do the right thing. And when we create new brew streams and new lines, which are, you know, £1 million lines, we actually are able to now place them with some of the best in the industry. So it's about using your leverage, not just your ambition, I guess, or your persuasion. It's actually about the pounds and pence to say, actually, you're not going to get this contract unless you have a certain, you know, minimum standard, if not maximum standard of sustainability.
That takes a degree of confidence to, I guess, kind of do that, isn't it? Say, actually, this is kind of how we're going to act as a business, and this is our model. But also the impact that you then have, if, like you said, and forgive my naivety in terms of like the distributed brewing model, when it comes to reporting, perhaps. So you mentioned kind of the point of brewing rather than having, say, the kind of the electricity and all of that on top. So how much of that is reported in your, say, impact or sustainability kind of report or journey?
Yeah, I mean, we published a B Corp impact report there just actually in August, which touches on that. But what we've effectively invested in is, you know, for starting with our 4 biggest lines of beer, in essence, we are going through scope 1 to 3 carbon reporting, and that will give us, I guess, the best and clearest indication. Whatever that number throws up is a number which becomes a benchmark. I think what would be really bad is if we went, oh, that number doesn't look good, and therefore we won't report it. But we're a small business that's, you know, got 8 days a week vouched for in just running the company. It's about how do we actually make that transparency make sense, make those changes make sense for us within all of the challenges that come to us. And I think trying to convince everyone that it's actually their priority is the real leadership challenge for ourselves, rather than the actual talking about it. Like, we're quite open. In fact, we have it's a slightly different thing, but we have a sort of DEI statement that we call work in progress, where we actually just basically say, this is how shit we are at DEI, but this is what we want to do. And I don't think we've ever been shy of saying we're not the best, because I think that's when you start to get in trouble, not just with consumers, but with customers, with your credibility. If you make a claim that can't be backed up, it will damage you somewhere else. So transparency for us is never really an issue. It's whether or not the consumer or the customer is literate enough to understand what that transparency means is probably the defining factor.
I think you're absolutely, in terms of what you're saying, like the transparency element is absolutely key. There's no point putting something on the website saying that you are if you're not. We saw when we kind of built includability, and we started going through the process, and we essentially took the best of what we've gone through as Planet Mark certified kind of organization, B Corp certified kind of organizations. Those processes that we really, really liked, we kind of adopted and created what we've now built. And a whole load of that is around saying, tell us exactly where you're at. Don't kind of put yourselves up here if actually you're genuinely down here, because down there is fine, but it's your starting point. And then we can create this environment where we can help you get on the road to being better. And if you can be better over the course of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24, 36, and so on, you're a much, much better business. So the transparency for us is absolutely vital. Lucie, we've spoken about an awful lot that could be deemed quite complicated when it comes to trying to create yourself an ethical supply chain. If somebody has minimal budget, and we've mentioned about cost of living crisis, which also then goes on to businesses as well, but they still want to do the right thing, what are some of your top tips for an organization to start that journey? And I'll come on to kind of Alan, Dan, and Ed as well, to kind of have their insight in how people can start, because I guess you've all got different journeys. But Lucie, what would you kind of suggest to somebody as a top tip with minimal budget?
I mean, start with just even understanding where you are. And I think as I said a bit earlier, is looking at where you spend your money. And already that can be very insightful. Because for instance, as a food business, you might think that most of your sourcing, or like most of your investment is throughout your supply chain, from sourcing ingredients from all over the world. But it could be that you end up spending a lot with like advertising or some recruitment, and just looking at where the most material impacts are is just by looking where the money goes, and then putting that a little bit together on even a visual map of where we are sourcing from, and what are these organizations looking like, what are their own commitments, what do they do that is out there already this. And then the second step is understanding the impact and having even the conversations with them. It could also be that you, as the one person trying to take on this exercise within your business, you're not necessarily the relationship holder to all of these different suppliers. So it's also about talking within your team and raising awareness of the topic and why it matters within the business, and getting those insights of from these relationship holders potentially. And then it's about also making like not just the commitments as in like broad, like too ambitious targets then you can fulfill. But I think, as other speakers have said as well, it's about the transparency and just saying like, this matters to us and we're committed to doing better. And as long as we're not as great as we aim to be, we will report transparently about how fit we are. And I think in those days, this is where you build the trust, and where you build the brand equity is when you can actually build this consumer trust, a lot more than saying, look at us, we're so great, and immediately it's a greenwashing red flag. So I think Definitely. If anything, yeah, as any person in the business, if you can build this like integrity and honesty and understanding of why this matters, not only to do the work, but to do it transparently, that's already a massive win.
I think, as you were saying, I think the importance of engaging with the rest of the team, who all have different relationships with different people, is a great start. What I will say is a shameless plug: if you do review and you're spending way too much on recruitment, definitely get in touch with Danny. He'd be all over it. So I'm going to kind of hand over to, I guess, kind of, I'm going to go to Dan actually to say kind of what are some of your top tips, and I'll come to Alan and then Ed, in terms of like somebody wants to start their journey, somebody wants to be better, do better. What are some of your top tips that you kind of learned as an organization, Dan?
I think for us, it's two parts initially. I think if you're starting out on a business and you've got that in mind, I think that's going to be a slightly easier journey because you're going to be able to make certain choices as you're beginning to set up. For us, we've been around currently for 14 years. So initially, when people started talking to us saying, look, you're doing a lot already, we think you should have a look at it. One thing was really clear in my mind. It was like, look, we're going to have to do this self-assessment, have a look at it and sit down. But if we're way off, at least we're going to know what we need to start doing as a business to get there. That was one of the big things. And also, I was very mindful that, I mean, not many businesses right now, especially through the pandemic, have a lot of surplus employees running around, not doing a great deal. Everyone seems to be at it big time. So it's trying to find the resource available to do it. So initially, I thought what was really good for us is we got all our key stakeholders around the table and essentially locked ourselves in a room for, I think it was 2, almost 3 days, where we were going through the self-assessment because we wanted to find it really quickly to get us over the line to see where we were currently at. What was apparent was we were kind of like, we were there, which was pleasant, a massive pleasant surprise. Then it was a case of like, how do we get someone in the business away from everyone's day jobs to actually drive through certain initiatives that we've got to put in place as part of the self-assessment? Then we can put the application through. So we found someone internally already that was very passionate about B Corp themselves, and they wanted to be the one that was going to drive it through. And I think as a business, we couldn't have done it without Laurie. She was so pivotal and passionate, and almost like a thorn in the side when everyone wanted us to achieve B Corp, but everyone had a day job to do at the same time. And she became pretty unpopular pretty quickly with a few people. But then as soon as we got it over the line, everyone came to thank me to say it was such a great idea. And I was like, we couldn't have done it without Laurie. It was just me coming up with an idea because I was told by people externally from what they could see us doing as a business, it was good. And I think from us, I think if from a timing perspective, we had a lot of values and beliefs and ethics around what we wanted to do as a business and what we could actually give back as part of that business, and even things like, you know, the environment and you essentially on this macro minimal level. And because we were doing all that, it was just nice. It was almost like external validation for us to get that bit at the moment. You know, almost like a rubber stamp, like, yeah, we are doing all the right stuff. Now we've got the opportunity to keep going from once you've got it. And it's almost going back to, I think, what Lucy and Alan were both saying. So we're not shouting and screaming saying we're the best B Corp out there. Far from it. We got through it and we got the score. And now what's really good is everything that we're doing internally. Everyone's like, this is really good. This is going to really help our B Corp as well. But it's that's not driving the reasons for us doing stuff. Actually, everyone's driving through certain decisions and they're making the right decisions because it's the right thing for us to do as a business, because we've got everyone driving it. It's now like that will complement it and that will help us for the next year, for the next year, for the next year. So I think I'm all for one for actually encouraging audits, normally because I'm not the one that's actually involved with the audits internally in the business. But from that continuous improvement to see yourself driving yourself in the right direction, I think it's super important. And super good, but I think, yeah, getting everyone around the table and getting someone passionate to drive it through, I think, is critical. And yeah,
I think you're way too humble, Dan. I would have absolutely taken the credit away from Laurie on that, 100%. But I think you're absolutely right. The part that you can play in empowering employees who actually have a genuine interest in this. So, you know, the idea might come from somewhere else, but actually there are people sometimes better than you to kind of lead this thing and kind of lead it with a passion, like you said, to be a thorn in the side, because none of this stuff, if you want to be a better business and make an impact, it's going to take time and it's going to be a process to get there where you need different people's time. I think our one thing is take that time. Like, you have to make that time. Otherwise it will just never, ever happen, because everyone's so busy, then life takes over, then your next day starts and you go again. Actually taking that time has been critical for us.
It's really exciting for me. I think it can help drive innovation. We've got a team of really phenomenal development chemists that are now completely out of the blue. This would never have happened had we have not gone on this B Corp journey. And they're now contemplating. I know to make a beauty product like this, it's always been done in a hot mix. Can we do this in a cold mix environment? And can we do that so it's less energy going through it? And that's actually prompting some really fascinating textures. There's some really, really good stuff that come out of it as a byproduct as well. I find it truly fascinating.
I love that. And innovation in any way, shape or form, innovation is only going to be a good thing. Alan, anything to kind of add to kind of what Lucie and Anna says from your journey? And, obviously I've read about kind of your journey and how it started, but as a business that you've evolved, what could you advise or give top tips on?
I guess, going back to the original question is like when you've started out, you've got low budgets, how do you start to make an impact? I guess actually, I think paradoxically, it's the best time, right? Because there's no ingrained incumbent behavior. There's no budget at risk in essence. And I think probably the best illustrative example of that, plus a little bit of innovation was, the war in Ukraine kicked off, about 18 months ago, which is just a mad thing to even say. And it really put a question mark on the availability of grains, the availability of the volatility of prices of barley versus wheat, oats versus wheat, and effectively the impact that had. And when we started to look into it, and when we started speaking with potential people we wanted to work with on collaborative beers, we came across this grain called fonio as a result of those conversations. And it's a smallholder grain that's perennial. It uses 33% less water than barley. It has these deep roots that allow other crops to go around it. It doesn't need nitrogen fertilizers, so you're not using oil and spraying them on crops. The climate aspect of that was really quite compelling, but when we understood, and we always sort of did understood when we were exploring it, that it was a crop grown by smallholder farmers in West Africa, and these are some of the least developed communities in the world. And we were launching a new beer in a customer. So we're starting from scratch. We had no budget. It was 4 times more expensive than barley, still is. And therefore the displacement of that would have a material impact on the profitability of the beer. And I think, cost versus ethics was basically the subject of this talk. But when we started to import it, we started a supply chain from scratch. And that was a big risk for us, right up until we actually had to mandatedly brew the first batch of beer. There was questions about how efficient this supply chain could be. But when you look at it, it's one of the best innovations in craft beer in total. It's driving growth within the category now. And that risk that we took to do that thing, the story that's behind it, obviously you mentioned that you actually quite like it, and I'm sure lots of other consumers do, but that actually becomes a pivot point where actually could this grain be a bigger part of our mix, over the long term, outside of that one actually relatively small customer. So the time to take the risks are really in your infancy. If we had known about this grain, years and years ago, we probably would have integrated a long time ago. But it is more expensive, but there is probably a longer term bet that will start to come down in cost as we get bigger. And just as a measure of how small changes can really transform things, 95% of fonio is eaten within the communities that grow it, and only 5% is exported. And we think that we're the 7th biggest importer of that grain, over the sort of annual basis in the world, which would put us somewhere behind like Italy in terms of the so if Brueggemann was a company, it would effectively be in Italy, and that type of zoomed out context, the points around can you go from hot to cold mixing, can you do these small things that ever might get adopted or might get scaled up, is kind of the best time to do that is when you're small, because you can take those risks. There's not that incumbency factor. And actually, as we go forward into even that supply chain, there's lots of developments we already have earmarked for 2024, which will hopefully accelerate that whole process. So I would encourage people, even if they make small bets, with the small amount that they have, it could, as long as it doesn't bring down the business with it, of course, then it could actually be something that you find a groove in and can differentiate from competitors, or just find it a better way to do what is essentially just putting grains in hot water and chucking in some hops.
It tastes good. Just so you mentioned kind of the fact that you've got some exciting stuff coming up for 2024. Is it an annual supply chain review that you do? Do you kind of do it as and when there is potentially a new product? What's your process for what you might want to do with your supply chain, and when does that get reviewed?
Yeah, I guess it's a mixture of both, right? I mean, I don't think we all get to October and say we need to start thinking about our supply chain. I think it's an ongoing thing, for sure. But also, it's just, you know, I've driven personally from the team this project, and I give it a 6 out of 10 because I think there's a lot of different things that if we got within the supply chain, we could turn to at least an 8 out of 10. And that sort of drive has taken months and months and months and months and months to go on. But really, the only thing that's waiting for that to become formalized is effectively when the customer can take it, or, you know, when there's opportunities for distribution. So that gives us both a sort of timeline to work to, and I guess a deadline, or a, you know, Christmas Eve to work to bring that into the world. You know, we annually review all our brewing contract. I mean, yesterday we sort of had a summary from our AMD about, you know, just how much progress we've made in our supply chain that way. But we also have to take every opportunity to I guess, you know, through the course of our daily lives, or, you know, daily working lives, look at things that are imperfect and try and, you know, change them as quickly as we can, rather than wait to, you know, maybe we're just not professional enough to have an annual review, but I feel like we're dedicated and passionate enough to make incremental changes pretty much every day, week, month, quarter.
Love that. Ed, anything to add in terms of kind of the top tips for kind of somebody starting out? Because then I've got another question I want to kind of ask Lucy, following on from what kind of Alan's just asked, actually.
For sure, yeah. Just a really quick addition. I agree with pretty much everything that everyone said, and, you know, that opportunity of starting out, you're not having to untrain or relearn anything. I think the only thing that I would add in, which continues off the last comment, is then just trying to make sure that becomes a regular part of your monitoring. You know, try and spread that across your org as you grow. You actually published a book called Mission Lit, which looked into a load of kind of inspiring businesses that you know, really inspire us. You know, Patagonia, Innocent, and finding their formula for success. So we talk about a thing called a golden KPI. So what are those things for your business that are really important that you can keep tracking? And, you know, not the traditional KPI of how many sales calls did you make, or how many tours converted. You know, really working out what are those impact drivers and putting those on the performance metrics across your organization. So, well, you might have one person who's leading the charge because they're most passionate about it. It actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy across everyone within your business, and that's going to make it more sustainable over time, because it isn't that annual supplier charter review. You might have a big supplier charter review every year, but actually everyone is constantly monitoring, and, you know, it's in their best interest to put new ideas at the table, and they will be reviewed, and hopefully that's going to create and agitate, you know, that continuous improvement in all aspects of your new business.
And I think, again, you're absolutely right. I think if you're treating your suppliers as partners, you're having so much regular contact with them anyway, that you will know that they still align with your values, that they're still doing the right things, and you'll soon pretty find out whether they are a supplier that maybe you shouldn't have kind of on your books. Lucy, I think kind of we're coming to the end of this, and it's kind of gone incredibly quickly. But you, as an organization, work with so many different kind of organizations. Do you have kind of one or a couple of kind of really inspiring examples of best practices from your clients that you've supported on at Greenheart?
Not that I would dare taking credits for any of the really hard work that our clients do themselves, and we're only there to like champion them and support them. I mean, we do work with some companies that have pretty impressive like fair trade program, community fair trade program, but that I would take zero credit in implementing that. And it's actually program that have been in the build for like 30 to 40 years. So it's also just to show that to build something that is really impactful is something that also take a lot of time. And like so cosmetic company basically really supporting through not only paying premiums and fair trade equivalent premiums, but also building capacity and supporting communities where they are of their end suppliers. But what I like to is celebrate each and any of their clients in every little light bulb moment of learning, or the ways that they do these exercises that are very time consuming and potentially dry into something that feels very much them. We have a client who is on the Isle of Wight, and they have a strong commitment in sourcing locally. And what they've done is a supplier celebration. So instead of just sending a questionnaire via email and then having just emails back and forth, they organized an event, invited a bunch of their suppliers on site to have real people conversations. And all of a sudden, this dry exercise of mapping and understanding supply chain and impact became a human to human, like also celebration of all of the intention in this journey. So I found that very inspiring. And then, of course, we have also some learnings of, I have a couple of examples of clients that just by just looking at where they are sourcing from, then have these little learnings of, oh, I didn't realize we were spending that much with like Google, or for instance, and like, oh, how come that Google is one of our significant suppliers? And this is where you see where the cogs are starting to run, and what kind of decisions, and these will be arguably different depending on the kind of company that you are, which industry, which size, and what matters also to you. Do you have a commitment that is more towards local sourcing, but you could also have commitments towards, let's say, sourcing from small independent suppliers, or companies that are founded by underrepresented founders, for instance. So it's also, you have a lot of room of deciding like what this positive impact looks like for your company.
And I think that's kind of almost an incredible place to kind of end, because we are kind of have come to the end of it. And I've seen the chat feed looking incredibly busy. So I think Dave's putting kind of links. We put on an employer support group every single month. So the link is in there. Please sign up, share it with your colleagues. We also kind of, we commit to kind of B1G1, and they're a big charity partner of ours. So for us, actually, we want to be partners. All of our suppliers are genuinely partners. We want to make as much impact, and that impact is not just within our business and who works with us directly, but what can we do to impact and inspire the people that might be associated with us. And that comes back to, again, making sure that we're transparent, but also being vocal in kind of what we're doing. So I think, just to kind of, I guess, summarize and reiterate, is that to have an ethical supply chain is going to take a bit of time. It doesn't always have to be extremely costly, but be really, really honest with yourselves as well as a business. Understand what's important to you as an organization. You don't have to do massive annual reviews, because you'll have great partnerships with who you work with anyway, but know your why. I think it's really important as a business. Know your why, what's important to you, and what is that golden KPI, as kind of Ed was saying. If you can know all of that, you've got a really great starting point. We've got people on this call that are leaders in their field, that have gone through probably a starting process, and then it's ever evolved. So you're never alone. So please do kind of reach out if there's anything you need, or any inspiration, or you're coming up against an obstacle. Reach out and actually have a conversation with us. We're happy to point you in the right direction. We want to be the conduit of incredible conversations, because then we can genuinely all make an impact. So I'll bid you farewell. Have an incredible rest of the day. Dan, Lucy, Ed, I know Alan's gone, but it's recorded, so I'll say thank you to Alan as well. Share across with your colleagues when it comes out to you. Anything you need from us, let us know. Otherwise, have a great afternoon and the rest of the week, and catch up soon.
Thanks very much.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.
Thanks, and bye.